Hola, hello, and welcome back. I promised that I would have more action happening today, and I'm super excited, seriously excited to have with me today Lisa Crispin.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
No, Lisa, it's I'm shaking a little bit.
Oh,
Yesterday, it was a honor as well to have Janet here and share a little bit of the experience. And I think it's gonna be great today to also have your perspective and the story behind, because Janet yesterday shared a little bit of how the books came up and
oh
all
yeah.
the agile efforts, which I'm dying to get into. But the first step for the ones that dare not to know you, can you share a little bit about you? Uh,
Yeah, I've been in the software business for over 40 years, starting as a programmer and been a tester for probably the last close to 30 years.
wow.
And always had a job as an IC on a team building things all that most of that time because that's what I love doing the most. But last year I got just a little burned out and
Really?
decided to go freelance. So I helped Janet with Agile Testing Fellowship and the book she's writing with Selena DeLucy, and hopefully get some. I've done a little consulting, so hopefully get some consulting and training to help pay the donkey's vet bills, and I also have time now because I'm not working a full time job. It's really great to have time to give back to the community, to help them with open source projects, help them with conferences like reviewing proposals and things I just didn't have time to do when I was working full time. So I'm really enjoying that.
I'm sure that we are gonna hear a lot about from what you're doing. It's weird to hear that you got the burnout and.
Well, I just got into jobs where I very carefully select what company to work for, and I can tell they're my people. They have a great culture. They're doing the good development practices like TDD and pairing and assembling and all the things. And then as soon as I go to work for them, the company decides it wants to IPO, and they fire the CTO that hired me, and they bring in new leadership. And despite the fact that we have successful, high-performing teams, they say, "No, we're going to do this now."
Oh, I mean.
And it's just that toxic. You can have very toxic corporate cultures nowadays. So
Oh, I'm sad
I
to
was more
hear.
used to the startup. I mostly worked for small startups before.
It's a different vibe, totally.
Yeah, yeah.
It's crazy. I'm sad to hear that you experienced that. Glad to hear that now you're in a better place. And
Well, I still learned a lot of those jobs and stuff, but I just couldn't deal with all the corporate BS.
yeah, it's tough. Been there. I totally understand and don't ever want to be near some of those things. But something that you mentioned that caught my attention big time. One thing that I generally like to support and try to foster here is women in tech.
Mm-hmm.
And you are what a woman you are. You and Janet. I like to call you the godmothers of agile testing.
Thank you.
And you have excelled. You have brought so many, I would say, even breakthroughs. But from your beginning, you mentioned that you started as a developer.
Mm-hmm.
So how was that? Because also, like, as a girl studying, did you study IT
I did
or?
not. My college degree is in animal science with a focus on beef cattle production,
What?
with a minor in French literature.
That explains a few things, but that's
And
interesting.
yeah, I had some early career aspirations, which turned out not to really be available for a woman back in the early 70s. And I wasn't brave enough to be a. Back then, I wasn't brave enough to elbow my way into professions that didn't want me. So I got an MBA in organization development and did research for a couple of years, and then I ended up needing a job and wanting to move to Austin, Texas. And I was looking at the University of Texas Employment Office, and they had a big sign saying, "Computer programmer trainee, no experience necessary." And I've done a little bit of computer work for my MBA and things like that, but this was a long time ago. We didn't use computers as much. So I thought, well, that sounds good. And I took the aptitude test, and they wanted somebody with a business background, with the MBA, that they liked that I had an MBA. So they hired me. And for a long time, I thought, I'll do this till I figure out what I really want to do. And at some point, I realized I really enjoyed it.
It's I'm processing all this because both you and Janet kind of didn't started in this, and you ended up like excelling big time. And I'm still like trying to my hamster here is spinning the wheel backwards now, because you just not only from a peculiar different career for what we are doing. I have to say you're the first that I met that have done like has that background
Well, there are a lot of I've run into people with very interesting origin stories,
here.
which is
And
good
Mhm.
because it's good to have that diversity.
That's well, that you make a very good point. Most of the people in QA that I have met come from a peculiar background.
Mhm.
You are the first studying the
Cattle
cattle
production.
and yeah, all that. But even there, I can kind of generate some linkings like cattle production. You already kind of have to see it's like a production line and check quality, and there are elements that I'm sure helped you. But how was that transition? Because you just jumped into this trainee programmer.
Yeah, I was so lucky. The University of Texas Data Processing Division, the leadership there were very smart. So this was back in 1982, and there were all the cowboy coders, programmers that really worked hard to make their coding obscure and not understandable to anybody else. That was so common.
Nowadays still.
And so these people said, we want everybody to be able to work on other people's code. Collective code ownership, as we call it now. We'll hire people that don't have any experience, they don't have any bad habits, and we'll just train them to code. We can teach anybody to code. We want subject matter experts. We need people with those different subject matter backgrounds. Things like the library, we had oil and gas applications, we had all kind of business applications, student registration, such a variety, and they wanted people with experience doing those things, and they could teach anybody to code. So they did, and they had a great program, and they'd bring in a cohort of go take us through the training program, and we would train the next cohort of people. So the newest graduates of the training program trained the next program. It was a good way to reinforce learning. And it was a very, I don't know what other shops were doing then for coding, but you would now probably call it pretty agile. We just sat down with the end users, which were academic departments. What do you need? Oh, you want an online library catalog. Well, I guess I better learn about library science, and just sitting down with the domain experts and working together to build up our applications. And it works super well. So I didn't know it, but, I don't know, maybe Waterfall wasn't invented, but I didn't know anything about writing requirements documents or doing analysis or any of those things.
That's I mean, how you grab some other topics and kind of like, yeah, let's library stuff.
We didn't have any librarians. We had one librarian in our department because we had this aptitude test people had to take, and it was timed. And IBM had a similar aptitude test back in the day, and it was multiple choice. And our experience was people with a library science background were perfectionists, and they couldn't do it in the time because they do an answer and they go think about it, and they'd overthink it, and they'd erase their answer, put another answer, and so they just took so long they couldn't get through the aptitude test. So they could never hire a librarian.
That's and then it generates like several different perspectives on what you were doing, the job, and you got into psychology as well because you say these people were perfectionists, needed more time, or how.
I don't know why they didn't just throw out the aptitude test, but whatever. I wasn't the boss.
I mean, those were the beginnings, and something interesting. Did you feel pressure or anything? How many more women were on those
we had
classes?
just as many women as men back then because in 1982, programming was still a low status job, low paid.
Really?
Because hardware was where it's at. And that was just a transition time when it's like, okay, we've got the hardware sorted out. Our chips are fast enough. Our disk farms only take up the whole basement of the building, not a whole city block. And the attention turned to, that's the software now that's important. And as software became more important and salaries went up, well, here's the sad truth. When that happens in a profession, men tend to get hired. So I was lucky to start when I did. And I saw the number of women kind of gradually go down until the late 90s. I was starting to work on teams with no women at all. So
this is impressive to me because as well, when you mentioned that the cattle business, you were kind of kicked out because of being a woman, and now it's like IT is where women are being like left out, and that it was a cool thing to do for women. I'm super happy to hear that the representation
Yeah, it
in
was
those
very inclusive.
days.
Yeah.
What happened? What do you think?
Well, it became high stat. I mean, I've heard other experts talk about it, and as it became higher status, that's just what happens in business, I guess.
Did
People have an unconscious bias towards hiring men, and more men wanted the jobs, so because they paid better. So
that's really
and so then probably things developed like having more, the kind of culture, and when it got into people working crazy hours and stuff, women wouldn't tolerate that or couldn't
Mhm.
tolerate that. But there's just a whole lot of reasons.
That's
It's a
interesting.
shame, and it's still going on. I think it's better today, but
Still
you
not
still see women
super
bailing
good.
out of tech.
That's something that drives me nuts. And I just noticed. Can we turn around the mic? It's not pointing upwards. And
I'm so
now with
sorry.
the no.
Use your error. How do you turn it around?
Just keep it the other way.
Like that?
Yeah,
Oh
looking
gosh.
up so that it's closer or
I hope
something.
people can hear me okay.
They could, but now we are getting noisy because I think the keynote's finished and some of the action.
How's that?
Excellent. Way better. Everyone, I don't want anyone missing any word from Lisa. Wait, because this conversation is super awesome. I'm learning on something that I came into this world 81, so I didn't experience much of that. I think my main experiences in IT were 2000, and then already was segregated.
Yeah.
In my generation, one, two girls, and that's it out of thousands of guys. And it's something that makes me happy to see that you were part of this group.
Yeah.
And what a group, and the excellence that you are showing. But moving forward, can you tell us? And we already have one side of the story. How did you meet Janet?
Well, in 2000, I joined my first extreme programming team because some friends of mine that I was working with went off to start their own company, and they said, "Lisa, you should read this book." And it was Kent Beck's Extreme Programming Explained.
Oh,
And up to at that job, I had been working at a startup, but we were very much waterfall. We had our phases
and yeah,
and this long release cycle.
or
And
PMPs and
every time we release a new feature, our competitors had to beat us to the punch.
huh.
And I was like, oh, what do we do? And then I read the book and I was like, oh, it's all about quality. It's all about people. It's all about working in these small chunks iteratively. It's all about testing. It makes so much sense. And so I begged my friends, like, you need a tester. Like, the books don't say I need a tester, but really it'll be helpful to hire me. So they did. And then all the books at the time, there were not very many about extreme programming, talked about testing, but they didn't mention what testers would do and a role of tester. And so I met Brian Merrick, I think, through the extreme programming mailing list, and also because I subscribed to the magazine that he edited at the time, Software Testing and Quality Magazine, which became Better Software.
Cool.
And he kind of connected me and Janet because he knew both of us, and he's like, you both work on extreme programming teams, you need to talk. So we started talking to each other, and we were both getting help from the extreme programming mailing list at the time, even though there were very few testers on it. But people were so welcoming. It was a wonderful community. And I kept saying, somebody needs to write it. And as we learn, here's how testing fits in and what value testers can add, and how do we teach the testing skills to developers who are now doing TDD and things like that. Let's share these experiences because we're going to have a lot more problems to solve. So let's share what we know. And nobody would write a book on it. Eventually, I did write a book with Tim House,
Mm-hmm.
testing extreme programming. And then a few years later, and Janet and I started doing conference workshops and stuff together. In 2002, I think was our first one at the XP Agile Universe in Chicago back then. And
Here as well.
Yeah, well, it was.
Reporting
It was
from Chicago. Wow.
Yeah. And so a few years later, when Addison Wesley Pearson, my editor, said, could you write another book but make it more general, agile, the extreme programming thing? People are not really going with that name, but agile's really gaining traction. And I asked Tip if he would co-author. He's like, no, I'm done writing books. So I asked Janet, and she was like, "Oh, I didn't really like to write, but I talked her into it, and
Cool.
never looked back. And of course, we worked really hard. She's got the great organizational skills. Like, let's line up the book. Let's create a release plan. She kept us on time, kept us focused. We got lots and lots of help from people all over the world. We interview people on other teams and see what problems did you have, how did you solve it. We did all that in the book. So that worked really well. And of course, we said never another book. So
It sounds a little bit like having a child, because from that guy's perspective, I have no idea, but I have heard that it's tough and all the pains and blah. But eventually, yeah,
you
let's.
block out. I guess I mean I haven't had kids either. You block out the pain. And
So one thing that jumps at me from what you mentioned, so the mind maps were more Janet's thing.
I feel like it was her. I mean, I was first introduced to mind mapping in 2006 at the Agile conference by Kay and John Johansson,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, wow, mind exploding.
Pun
And so
intended.
I used them, but I do think it was Janet's idea to mind map the book. She's just so organized. Because
I
my first book that I wrote, I actually had advice from Kent Beck, like don't make an outline, just start writing, and the book will be what it wants to be. But do write every day, even if it's only for 5 minutes, which is great advice. And it worked out. That book turned out fine. But Janet was like, no, let's have a plan. And that, I think I was much more comfortable with that actually.
I think something great, and that I can tell from seeing you together how you work and from what you're both. And now I know both sides of the story. It's always like these dynamic duos where each one complements the other
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
gets working.
Mhm.
I almost get shivers like picturing you like bringing different skills and Janet. No, the mind map and let's do it.
Well, and Janet, I'm not really an idea person. I'm a first follower. So if somebody else has an idea, oh, I can take and run with that, spread that idea around. But I don't have the idea to start with. But Janet comes up with ideas all the time. The holistic testing model, the quality practices assessment model. That's just she comes up with it, and then it's like, oh yeah, I love that too, and let's, I can help her build it out.
Wow.
And our experience is complementary too, because I mainly worked on small startups, and I would be on a team a long time. So I might be on a team, 8, 9 years, and I see them go from this total chaos to a high performing agile team doing continuous delivery. Whereas she's going into big organizations, big corporations that are trying to transition to agile. And then what do we do about testing? Well, our poor testers, what do you do? And so she's seen like the big enterprising side of it. And yeah, you come up with different problems and stuff. So
Because you're totally right. It's a totally different type of beast, the big corp and the startup. Because the ways that you can think on in a small startup is like incredibly different from all the safe adaptations and things on corps, and
right.
I understand now also like you bring both perspectives and can come to a common ground or put the differences. That also explains a lot.
Yeah.
Where and I'm taking some of your recommendations here on order and the 5 minutes. I'm gonna take it to like 5 minutes every
Yeah.
day.
It's really
I
important.
need to go back to that. Some other things.
Get that book written.
Yeah, I'm very very badly behind. Uh, Speaking of, how long did it take you to write the first book, the XP?
I think it took us about 15 months.
Okay.
Oh, the XP one, yeah. I think all our books have taken about that same amount of time, except Condensed might have taken a little less, but sometimes it's harder to write a short book.
I know the like 3 years ago you were just publishing agile testing condensed.
Yeah.
Do you mean that one a shorter was tougher or
It still took us about 9 months, I think, even though it's shorter, because
it was done in an agile way, if I remember?
Well, same, just like the other books, right? We had our mind map and our release plan, and but we wanted it to be no more than 100 pages. That was our goal, and we spent a lot of time cutting it down. So that's hard. It's like Mark Twain said, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. It takes longer. And we also really wanted to have good resources to link people to, because, okay, we're just giving you the high level view. if you want to know more, go back to our other books or go back to this person's books or wherever. So there was a lot of research that went into that book.
Because it's always tough. You remind me, what's this book, The Elements of Style,
Yeah,
where shorter is better than
it
trying to
is.
cut it off.
Shorter sentences, shorter books, especially nowadays. People just don't want to.
The attention span, right?
Our original books are huge. We didn't intend people to read them cover to cover. We thought they'd dive in where they needed to. And the
No, no.
condensed is works because it's an overview of both, plus more stuff. But we point people back to. You don't have to read the whole book; just read the chapter. That's what we intended. But people see a book that's an inch thick and go, "No thanks." So, people change over time. People are used to ebooks and reading on their Kindle or on their computer phone.
I don't know if it's because I was desperate to learn and understand this agile beast, but I did cover to cover both
Oh,
of the books.
yay! That's so nice.
No, and I have to say it marked a difference in my career, like understanding because I was so waterfall. We need frozen environments. How do they dare to put more changes every sprint? And they are breaking my automations. All those stories. And when I started reading them, as you say, like oh, and then connections started to happen, and it was a great experience. And when I read um, the short one, I was like, okay, this is like a digested version that I
Yeah.
can give to people that needs to understand, like a quick,
We
just
hope
dive.
that managers would read it because it'd be short.
Yeah, I have expectation. Yeah,
No
I mean,
offense to any managers.
any no, I mean it's not an offense because most of the time they don't have to understand the deep things that
Right.
we're talking about. A digested version, I have been there, that you have to explain things to management who may not know technical stuff. They just want to, are we going to production or not? And some of those things, like, okay, to me it has been like, okay, you have a puppy, you train it, that's your automation, and you have this. So you gotta figure out ways. I really hope if anyone in management is watching, pick up that book, please, right? Um, and I think it makes a difference to understand what are the key culprits on really becoming agile, really doing it. What do you see are like the main stumbles on organizations nowadays, or not nowadays, like from all the time that you have been doing this?
I, I have always seen and still see a couple things. One is teams always take on too much work and they have too much work in progress. So they cut corners like, oh, well, we'll do the testing later, we'll do the automation later, we'll do the performance testing later, or whatever it is. Um, that's super common. And then they get into the mini waterfall. And that's the other thing that's a mini waterfall. We have testers embedded on the team, but we still throw testing to them. We're, the whole team is not taking responsibility for quality and testing. We know we can't test quality in, we have to build it in. Testers have to be involved in those upfront discussions and designs to try to prevent bugs, get that diversity of viewpoints, get everybody involved, and cut down our feedback cycles and our delivery cycles by working in tiny chunks,
Sometimes
getting it
there's,
all the way done.
yeah. Um, I mean, I'm already like bouncing on all those because sometimes there's not even feedback, true feedback,
Yeah.
because there are sometimes where retrospectives are like, you are not really checking what you did well or wrong, or and especially feedback from production. Many are not like even getting to production, and
Well, I still see today the teams that call themselves agile, the developers write the code, it gets in production, and when there's a problem, a different team is in
fix
charge
it
of
up
fixing
and
the
fix
problem,
it.
the maintenance team. So the developers never have any feedback on the pain they cause customers. So how do they know they should improve?
Yeah, how do they know if if what they are doing is right, if they are going in the right direction? Because that's another one that I see more on agile than QA generally. Yeah, this is my product. I'm throwing it, throwing it, throwing it. I'm continuous. I'm throwing, but never hearing back. And probably what they are throwing, the user don't even like it, use it, or has the best impact.
Yeah, I love the DevOps movement or the DevOps culture. It's like the we build it, we run it
Hmm.
mentality. Of it's our product, it's our baby. We're creating it, and we're taking care of it in production and taking care of our customers. It's a much better, healthier attitude, but I don't see it as often as I'd like.
There are still these like silos and divisions and phases. I it drives me nuts when there's that as the QA team and the agile team. Like,
Yeah.
why aren't they like inside or collaborating?
Hmm.
And now you said that like that's the pain point from behind. What do you see being a difficulty into improving this agile, like from now on, or things that do you think people will still stumble with those things, or?
Well, change is slow. I mean, some people say, "Wow, we learned about all these great core development practices with Extreme Programming back in 2000, and they're shown to work." For example, test-driven development. I think there's evidence out there that it prevents like 80% of the bugs that most teams experience
Hmm.
don't do TDD, and yet it's so poorly adopted. So few teams still do it. It's just change is slow, change is hard. There, there are many reasons for it, and I'm hoping it's just more and more people will realize the value of those good practices. I think a part of it is the corporate leadership, executives. They have to understand the real value of quality, what it does for their business, and why they should invest money in it. And the high performing teams I've worked on, our executives understood we needed time to learn these good practices and build these good foundations of really learning to do well designed test automation and things like that. That would pay off. People hear the word agile, they hear the word sprint, and they say, well, we're doing agile, we're going to go faster. You don't go faster. You do
No.
eventually once you've gotten good at all those good practices and once you've learned the business domain so you can help them whittle down what they think they want to the very minimum that customers need. There's all kinds of things that go into it, but it takes time to learn that. And then once you do learn it, then you go fast, 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 or you look fast because you got the business to
Because we're doing
pare
sprints,
down.
that's
Yeah,
fast, and
but
that's
they
it.
got the business to pare down their requirements to what was really valuable, and you look a lot faster. You're giving the customers so much value so quickly. But the American economy at least rewards short-term
Hmm.
gains because we have stockholders that we have to satisfy, and that's why you see these big layoffs. Because we're going to make this quarter look good. We're not only thinking about the next quarter or 10
Less
years down the
salaries, and
road.
that's
So, I mean, there's some different difficulties just with our larger business environment that work against us, I think.
something critical or key that you mentioned. Wanting to push so much in every sprint, the
Mm-hmm.
obsession with new feature rather than parity with feature and quality.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that we are cranking up too much per sprint,
Yeah.
just trying to make progress. QA, hardening sprint, or we'll do it something,
Yeah.
and the technical debt starts to become a problem, and then anyone starts to kind of hate agile and hate the process.
Right.
And I like that to kind of budget for that. It's always this difficulty, right? It's like paying for insurance. You don't
Mm-hmm.
know until you really
Yeah.
need it, or you feel like you're wasting money. How and to ramp down? I promise it wouldn't be that long. Um, any recommendation that you would give to the audience, to organizations, or that they should do to get better at their agile QA efforts, or what to do?
Well, of course, I hope they'll read our books. And Janet might have mentioned we have a new mini book that's available for free download on agiletestingfellow.com. That's on our holistic testing model.
Gratis, free.
Yep.
Take
You
a
don't
look.
even have to put your email. Just click the download button.
Wow! Oh my God!
But
Go and check it.
I'm going to recommend. There's so many books I could recommend, but because we've talked about how do you make your business executives understand the value of quality and the need for investing. And the book Leading Quality by I
And
can't think of the name
quality.
of it right now.
Uh,
My brain is full of new things
no,
from the
no, me
conference.
as well. I'll try to post
Google
it in
it.
the notes. Yeah, yeah,
Leading
yeah.
Quality. Always Peer and one of the authors.
I have to do this now
Um,
because
anyways, it helps. They were two startup founders whose startup failed because of their bad quality, and they realized why it failed. And they were not testers. They were not people who knew anything about quality
Ronald
software.
Cunnings,
Yes,
always
yes,
peer.
exactly. And
Take a look.
And so they wrote us a small book that you can get your manager to read. But they explain from a business perspective, this really matters because your business can go under when your quality is bad. It happens all the time. And you really do need to make that investment. It does pay off. So being able to speak the business language is really important, and that book is helpful.
For QA people, because sometimes we say like, no, I won't care with those sharks at the business, but it's important that you can communicate where you are. I love that perspective because if you don't know how to translate in money that we were talking earlier, that's a big language that you need to be able to talk and explain the repercussions. The business can go down if we don't pay attention to this.
It's like when my team was trying to get some hardware to do performance testing that looked because we didn't have anything that looked like production, and our executives kept blowing us off until one day the site went down because we had too much load.
They cared, right?
And we couldn't even, of course, we couldn't even put up a page to say our site's down. And our CEO
Wow.
was like, "Can't you just put up a page?" And we're like, "What do you not understand about the machine crash?" And the next day we had the budget.
Of course.
You don't want that to have to happen.
Sadly, many organizations, management do not understand until they are beaten in the behind. And hopefully, if you are watching this, if you're management and you know the value of investing, please, please, please pay attention to that. And second, Lisa, I love that you reference to books right away. Personally, it's a very high tier way to install software here and very, very important. Highly recommend it. Her books are awesome. I love them. Made a difference in my professional life. Again, no, I really mean it. Take a look. There are so many free sources. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you or find out more of what you're doing, where can they find you?
Well, my website is lisacrispin.com, and it has the links to all our other websites. And I'm Lisa Crispin on all the social medias, so you can find me easily.
Easy to find. Get in touch. Master, godmother of agile testing. I love to have you here, Lisa. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and I've been very happy to learn more about performance testing over the years because it's not one of my strong points. So thank you for all your work in that.
I hope to be able to help on that, and let's see where we were talking. Some things may come, but we'll stay tuned. This is still second day of Agile Testing Days here in Chicago. This was Lisa Crispin. Such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you all. Get in touch.
Take care, everyone. Adios, or until later, because I'll be still around doing some noise. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Adios.